that to get to this underlying cause, it's not a mental process. It is a mental process, but there's so much of a palpatory and a certain dexterity that you have to develop, rather than the complex intellectual constructs about what may be the cause, you know. So it's very down to earth. It's very literally a hands-on approach.
For those who are new to Shinkyu University, welcome. The whole premise of this channel is to get more people introduced to Japanese acupuncture. My name is Maya Suzuki, and I am interviewing today Daniel Luz. I just love Daniel. I first met him on the In Touch Japan tour. Gosh, I don't even remember when we met. Maybe 5 years ago. 14 was it?
I think yes.
Yeah, 14. So several years ago. He's just such a pleasure. If you're new to this channel, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell. It's totally free to you to subscribe, and you can always change your mind.
Well, if I can briefly introduce myself, my name is Daniel Luz, and I'm a Brazilian, and I've started practicing Qigong in 1982. So I'll soon be doing my 40 years anniversary with Qigong and Tai Chi. And I started the actual clinical practice with Chinese medicine by shiatsu. That is, I already started entering through the Japanese door to the universe of Chinese medical thought. So, and that was in 1989. So I have accumulated a bit of experience because I've never done anything else. I've always been a pro working with Chinese medicine all my life. And nowadays, I have found, I've begun studying Japanese acupuncture in Rio with my sensei, Akasio Suzuki, who is super knowledgeable, knows just about everybody. You know, he knows the gossips about all the Japanese masters and stuff. And I've begun to learn with him in 2006, so it's been 15 years. And I was really fascinated by the role that, a visual deficiency played in the development of Japanese styles of acupuncture. I mean, they have used their extraordinary sensibility, touch sensibility, to really refine those techniques like point finding, channel palpation, correct location of positioning of the needle, and observing whether the different position of the needle has changed the pulse even before actually inserting the needle, and all this incredible subtlety that Japanese acupuncture has. All this has really fascinated me. And also, since I've been practicing Qigong for so many years, and I've always wanted to be able to treat people with Qi emission in a, Wai Qi Liao Fa style. But I was never able to do any of it. So after many, many decades of frustration, when I found Japanese acupuncture, it opened the doors for me to begin to treat people with Qigong as an addition to my practice of Japanese acupuncture. Because I started by the Nagano Matsumoto system, right, which I use even today. So they have this very detailed Fukushin technique that is trunk examination, palpatory examination. And so basically there's the painful points, and they shouldn't be painful. And if they are, they indicate a certain kind of problem. And Nagano sensei developed like impossibly efficient solutions, strategies for these problems. And after the application, normally it's like 25 minutes with OQ in the needle, often lots of OQ. And then when you go back to the palpation of the painful zone, it's no longer painful. So it's surprising for the patients. They really stick to the treatment after that because they know that, wow, something has changed. Like it's no longer. Are you still palpating with the same strength? They always ask that. Yeah, I'm sure you've noticed that. So I found out that using qi, you can have also this effect of relieving the fukushin. So this was great for me. So I'm very enthusiastic about the possibilities of a Japanese acupuncture and Qigong together, especially for the West. Because if you just wave your hands, looking venerable, this doesn't persuade anyone. People think you're just playing with them. But when you go back to the horribly painful liver 14 point and you palpate it and it's zero, no pain anymore, then the patient actually he's forced to recognize, to acknowledge that something has changed. And very, very often also the symptomatic presentation, so long as it's qi related, right? If it's blood related or if it's gene related, it may take a while longer.
So Daniel, you were talking about this this beautiful combination that you're doing with Japanese acupuncture in particular, I think Nagano style and Qigong, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, and so I'm curious, maybe just to back up a step or two, is how did you very first get introduced to Japanese acupuncture? What was your invitation into this part of the industry?
Well, it all began in 1989 when I learned shiatsu with my then Taiji teacher in Rio. So we spent about 1 year and a half doing a very, very classical oriented shiatsu, that is palpating each point and trying to ascertain if it's full or empty or balanced, and going point by point like this, and on the floor on a mat. So no treatment bed for this. And I've spent 11 years doing shiatsu. I've used to do even up to 45 hours a week of shiatsu. It was hard work. I was known in Rio as a shiatsu practitioner, but finally I realized that I wasn't going any further. I could treat certain things, but others didn't really advance under my treatment. So this bothered me, and I began to look elsewhere. So I found Akasio Suzuki, who is a teacher also in Rio, and he was given an Anma course, a brief introduction to Anma. So I did that, and this greatly improved my results. I was fascinated. And finally, Akasio opened up a very small private class for like 5 students in his home, actually, because he used to see his patients at home. So I used to go to his place once a week, and for some years, I think 5 years, and he began teaching us Kiko, Matsumoto, Nagano's Kyoshin, and then we moved on to other things too, like Tong style. He's very skilled practitioner of Tong style acupuncture, so I got into that too, and that was it. So just to round things up, I decided to go to Japan with you and Jeffrey and Steve, and so it was a wonderful trip that really convinced me that Japanese acupuncture was my thing.
So I have had the pleasure of meeting Akasio as well, and he is absolutely, he's so great. He's so warm and inviting. So I'm curious, are you still studying with him? because I know that you've branched out and that you're also teaching yourself. So where is your focus of study right now? And then also for teaching, what are you teaching this Qigong and Japanese acupuncture? And if so, is that more like a is it Kiko style or Nagano style? Because I know there is a little bit of difference. And for those who are new to this channel, new to Japanese acupuncture as well, could you also explain the difference between Kiko style and Nagano style, please?
Well, actually, I can explain that. All I know is Kiko style, which is, of course, not pure Nagano style, because Kiko, she studied with many, many great Japanese teachers, such as Manaka Sensei and others.
Mm.
So she kind of synthesizes many things in her style. But basically, my first Japanese acupuncture Bible was in the spirit of Master Nagano, the classical by David Euler and Kiko Matsumoto.
Mm.
And I believe that in there we have more or less all the Nagano that's in Kiko style. It's there. So that's where I got my Fukushin reading from. And actually, clinical practice has shown over and over and over and over that this system of treatment for related to the relief on pressure pain for these points in the trunk and abdomen is very efficient.
Mm.
What I mean is that it's very streamlined. I think Japanese acupuncture is that it's streamlined. So you're very no nonsense and objective. So this is hurting. So if you treat that, this will stop the pain, and this will also fix several possible problems that may be related to pain in this area. So, for instance, if you treat the kidney vacuity or adrenal treatment, like Nagano used to say, so, or I suppose he did, this will treat at the same time like night sweats, menopausal heat. It will also treat difficulty concentration.
Mm.
This may treat urinary problems, especially, for instance, caffeine and having a leak, urinary leak when you cough, and many, many such things. So instead of chasing after symptoms, you can go straight to the cut to the chase, really.
So,
And
I mean, let me cut you
yes,
off there for a minute, just because I think what you just said was really, really important in that Japanese acupuncture, in essence, and I would almost say Japanese culture, in essence, is very objective and streamlined. I almost would use the word scientific. There's pain, we've done the point, there's no longer pain. You know, it's very, very, very objective. I like the way you put that. And it's just such a beautiful and simple explanation of what I think most Japanese acupuncture really is, which is very scientifically looking at, does this work? And if it does, it should work in predominantly most of the cases with a similar presentation, and really like breaking it down. And then the second part that you were saying of like cutting to the chase of like, these are the symptoms, but this is the underlying problem. And so maybe you have to take care of symptom A and B before you get to the underlying problem. But in essence, we always want to go to this underlying problem and really figure out what it is and treat that in order to get rid of all of these symptoms over here. I mean, and I would say that is true for almost all Japanese acupuncture styles. They might approach it a bit differently, but it was just a really, really great way to explain it.
yes, and what I think is really interesting is that to get to this underlying cause, it's not a mental process. It is a mental process, but there's so much of a palpatory and a certain dexterity that you have to develop, rather than the complex intellectual constructs about what may be the cause, you know. So it's very down to earth. It's a very literally a hands-on approach.
Yes,
So
and
this,
yes, exactly. My teachers would always say, they always would comment, and many Japanese acupuncturists have commented to me on this, saying that most acupuncturists of the West are all in their head and they're not in their hands.
totally, yes.
Yeah, and that they need to move down and be in their hands. And I think, yes, exactly as you said, it's a palpatory understanding of the problem and clinical application of the problem rather than a theoretical one.
Yeah, and I see this, maybe I'm wrong, but I think that this development came out of the fact that acupuncture was a visual deficient person's profession. If I'm not mistaken, I've read somewhere, I think in Shudo Sensei's book, that up to 1927, they didn't have an official license for practice for people with normal vision. It was only after 27, according to Shudo Sensei, that they started also giving official certification for acupuncturists with normal vision. Mm-hmm. So I think that their contribution is huge. It has really changed the course of Japanese acupuncture. Of course, there's also the fact that in Japan, you have to pay for your acupuncture. So this, you have to convince your patient that what you're doing is worth their money. So it has to give you immediate results, some immediate results. Japanese public, as I understand, you would know better than me, of course, Maya. They are not very patient about treatments that may take, 2 months, 3 months, going 2 times a week or even once a week. And this is what happened in China, because since all treatment was done according to where you lived, you had to go to the health center that tended to your 就绪, to your living quarters unit, right? So, and actually, normally the protocol was 1 week or 7 days straight, 15 minutes treatment. And often you wouldn't even find the same acupuncturist treating. So they would look at your file and reapply the needles, which is a very herbalized approach, actually. It's like the needles are the formula. So you have to apply it again for a certain period of time for it to work. I understand the reasoning as it applies to herbal medicine. But when you take this reasoning to acupuncture, it entirely loses meaning. It's completely meaningless, because if you applied those needles and they were apt and they did work, then the next day the situation is no longer the same. Yes. Right? If it worked, it's no longer the same. So you have to change something.
Well, and I would argue the same I would argue the same for herbal medicine, though, as well. If it's really working, then usually the situation of the patient is different day to day. I mean, I would hope so, right?
Yeah, one would hope so. But anyway, in acupuncture, this is very, very clear, right? So, and if it didn't work, why would you repeat it? So it makes no sense. That's what I've learned from Kuwahara Sensei, for instance, is everything is new. It's what you find. The patient is not some idea of a patient with a syndrome or something. It's that which you can see, touch, and approach right at that time of the consultation.
That's so well said. And I really just want to repeat that, because it's so, so important that application of acupuncture is for the patient as they are, and as you can touch and see, and as they feel in that moment, and not as they should present in a textbook. Totally. It's so that, I mean, that right there, and you take away anything from this video and this interview, take away that, because I find that one of the things that most people come to me and with this this question of, with TCM, like I've applied it and I've applied it. Maybe you've done it for 1 month out of school or 20 years after. And everyone reaches this barrier of, okay, I don't know how, like the protocol's not working. So now I need to learn a new protocol. And I always go, no,
Oh
you
yeah.
don't need to learn a new protocol. You need to learn how to accurately see and touch and palpate the patient.
Mm.
Yeah. And then how to apply. Yeah. I mean, it's such an important point that you just said there. I mean, I'm curious, like how, I know you were saying that Japanese acupuncture, it really seems that it's transformed you're not only your career because it's of the shiatsu and then going into the anma and kiko style. I mean, how would you say that Japanese acupuncture has really affected your clinic, and
Okay.
how would you say it's changed the trajectory of your career?
It has affected my clinic first and foremost by giving me much more efficiency in my treatments.
Mm.
So I started to get results I had heard about before, but I couldn't do it myself. So when I switched to Japanese acupuncture, results came like that.
Mm.
So everybody was very satisfied to have these results. Secondarily, my technique, needle insertion technique, improved a lot.
Mm.
So my needling became, over a period of time, quite painless. I could
Mm.
almost say entirely painless. Of course, I started to use Japanese needles too, and there's a hardware part that's important too. So using that, people were more comfortable with that treatment, so they gave me a bit more time to go on with the treatment because they weren't so bothered by the needling itself.
Mm.
And what's more, I've gained a lot in self-assurance, because even if the symptoms could not be immediately changed, for instance, someone comes to your how do you say that in English already? To your office, yeah.
Mm.
I've been talking so much in French that I'm afraid I'm losing my English, you know. So um, their main complaint is insomnia.
Mm.
So you can't fix that. You can't know if you had a result on that or not, or say constipation. God forbid you got a result. So we have to wait to see what happens, right?
Mm.
So how can you, as a practitioner, be reassured that, yeah, well, finally, this thing I spent the last 50 or 45 minutes doing to this patient, it did generate a response. So there's the palpatory, the Japanese pulses, which are very, very objective, simpler to evaluate, and many physical markers that you can observe that will tell you, yes, what you did work, or no, what you did didn't work. You have to do something else. You have to look somewhere else
Mm.
for the solution for this patient. So you're never stuck. You're never trapped by the sticky ointment of the diagnostic.
Mm. Mm.
You
Mm.
know, okay, it seemed to be that, but actually this didn't really work. So what else could be wrong with this? Oh, maybe there's some stagnant blood too. Let's recheck on the Oket's zone. Oh yeah, now that I really palpate this correctly, I can see there's a small bit of pain and hardness here. So let's do liver 4 and lung 5. So okay, and then things change.
Mm.
So you can always follow the patient by the patient's body signs. This is very reassuring.
Yeah, and it's one of the things I think I was most surprised about. So for those of you who don't know my background, I studied in Japanese school in Japan, Japanese acupuncture school in Japan. And then I was an apprentice first, and then I went to school, and then I practiced there. And all of that happened before my initial exposure to acupuncture really outside of Japan. And one of the things I was really surprised about is exactly what you're talking about, Daniel, which is that most practitioners don't have any really concrete way to double check their findings, nor
Mm.
do they look for concrete, like not even rechecking the pulse. It's just you check the pulse in the beginning, you look at the tongue, you listen to their list of complaints, and then you put needles in according to prescription. And then the next time you come in, or the patient comes in, I mean, then you ask, was there a change? Right.
Exactly.
And so it makes each treatment, when you have that method to like double check yourself, it makes each treatment more of a geek out session, at least for me, because I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I did that, but that didn't work. Okay, so let's try this. Okay, that worked. All right, now move your shoulder. Okay, now your shoulder doesn't feel painful anymore. Okay, so let's try this. And it's always like a beautiful little dance, like you're never taking
Yeah,
one step A, B, C, D, E ever. There's this improvisation that can happen throughout the treatment, which just makes it so much more exciting. And the patient can actually then participate in their healing as well, I believe. So it's just so important. Now,
totally.
you mentioned French. So I'm curious, could you tell me, I know that you're teaching in France. I think you're also teaching in Brazil. Could you tell me a little bit
Yeah.
more about what you're teaching, how you ended up teaching in France and in Brazil, and kind of what the state of that is now with COVID and going forward?
Are you sure you want to go into that? Because it's weird. It's really weird. Okay,
Weird is fun.
so
Let's do weird.
let's do weird. Okay, so initially, as I was telling you, my okay, it all began in 2011 when we had these horrible floods in my state, Rio, where thousands of people died. It was
Okay.
the worst natural catastrophe in the history of Brazil.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and this flooding struck especially because there were many earth mudslides,
Mm.
like half the mountain sliding down and destroying everything on its path. You know. So this happened in the mountain area around Rio, like 80 kilometers away from Rio proper. So my wife's family had been living there for a while. My wife was raised there. So we were in our vacation in the beaches close to Rio, and then we rushed back to help with with the disaster.
Mm.
So what I did is I put up a website, and I had some donations for needles, and I put up three dispensaries, one associated with the mayor, another with the Catholic Church, and a third that was some impromptu place that was an abandoned hotel, and
Mm.
some young people decided to open this up to shelter people that had become homeless. So I worked in these three different places, and what happened is that after a certain moment, it was so chaotic. We didn't have a treatment table. We didn't have even chairs sometimes,
Mm.
and sometimes there was just me and the patient. I had to do something. Needles, there weren't any more needles. So I had to do something. So what I had been practicing and researching for 5 years, I said, well, the time for self-doubt is over. I gotta treat these people now. It has to work. And so I began to treat them like simple things, for instance, metal water points, especially on yang meridians, because they're also a Jing Yang points. So they shake up the meridian, and they also purify and take out heat from the meridian, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So this normally works like a charm for helping people recover range of movement, provided that the problem is heat and blockage in the said meridian, right?
Mm.
If it's something else, it won't work. So I began to treat people like that, and surprisingly, the people began to get better. When I say began to get better, I mean they were like 75% better in 2 minutes treatment,
Wow.
45 seconds treatment, 30 seconds treatment. So I was very surprised by that, because I never thought that I, not being Japanese, not being a Chinese, not having been raised in a monastery in southern China and practicing, just a Brazilian, right? So, okay, I had been practicing hard for many years. There was a time when I practiced up to 10 hours a day of Kung Fu. Yes, I was an athlete. I have many medals for Brazilian champion Tai Chi, quite a few. So, but anyway, I didn't have the link to connect to treatment. And then these circumstances forced me, it was a kind of birthing process, painful, full of suffering, but finally something emerged out of that. It became undeniable to me that actually trying to stimulate the acupoints by qi emission did yield results, and did yield impressive, amazing results. Now the patients, they were like, flabbergasted. They didn't know what was going on, but they were glad. So they called all the people who were in the shelters. Hey, come on, there's a guy here who can do something that's really good. So I became popular among those the refugees from the homeless. And after that, I pondered long. I said, wow, what if this was a one-time thing? And so I began to use that on my office, and the results were there, the very same results. So I decided to expand. Okay, so matter water points worked. What if the other Nagano style strategies work too? So I began to do the treatment just by throwing the qi at the points and then palpating again. And lo and behold, it did work. So I thought, wow, this is fascinating. So I kept studying that for 5 years and developing a technique that could be taught. So I had this, there's a Qigong part in my certification program. I have, it's a 7-part Qigong style. Normally it's 5-part Qigong, right? You have to calm the spirit. You have to reinforce correct vitality. You have to expel the filth. You have to circulate the good qi once you have cleaned yourself. And finally, you have to tai qi, that is to break up qi. This refers to the qi stagnations that may eventually have accumulated as a result of your practice. And then to Westerners, I added two more courses, that is feeling the qi, because many people, they don't feel the qi because they don't think it exists. So they're rather close to it. So there's many practices that help you feel the qi. And finally, Fa Gong, emitting the qi. Fa Gong is the easiest one. So I've created this part, and then a second part where we study the Nagano strategies and also some other strategies. Something from Kobayashi sensei, for instance, and some things from Kuwahara sensei, and some things from Miyawaki sensei too.
So I just want to go back and real quick chat about this, because I think it'll be a really novel concept to many, unfortunately, that the idea of channeling, not only feeling qi or understanding your qi, but then also being able to correctly channel it and then apply it. I mean, in essence, that is what acupuncture is, right? And one of the things that I go through in my course in Shinkyu University, the very first thing I go through is understanding what qi is, or qi is to Japanese, because in the Japanese language, normal, everyday language, someone who's not in any type of Eastern medicine at all, normal language has over 60 phrases that use the word qi in them. The phrase to multitask actually means to throw your qi around, kiu kubaru, right? The phrase to be sensitive to someone or to be inclined to be sensitive to their needs, or to, you know, all of these phrases that we have in English, and I'm sure you have in Portuguese and in French as well. And all of those words in Japanese use the word ki, all of them. And so ki is so prolific in their society, and I'm sure in Chinese culture and society as well, that for you to go to acupuncture school and say, okay, now we're going to channel our ki, for them, it's like, oh, yeah, of course, because that is part of life. You know, like the word for air, kuki, the last character of kuki is ki, you know? So even the breath, that the air that we breathe is ki. And so I think it's very important what you're doing, which is going in and saying, okay, let's actually understand and learn how to feel ki, because it's something that what most Japanese practitioners do for those of the West is, oh, if you don't feel it, it's okay, you'll feel it eventually.
Oh, yeah.
You know, and they just, and it's as that tried and true Japanese practice of, if you don't get it, it's okay. You're just going to do it for another 50, 100, 300, 3,000 hours, and eventually you'll get it, you know, like, and maybe we'll give you a hint at like the 3,000 hour mark, but until then, you just need to practice. So I love that you're going out and really making a practice that's step by step, it sounds very easy to understand, and, you know, gives someone a practice to not only work on themselves, which I feel is one of the most important things you can do, is to treat yourself.
Totally.
Right? So being able to treat yourself, and then once this is clean and placid and flat, so to speak, then only then do you start emitting ki, because as my teacher says, well, my teacher's teacher, Yasuda Sensei's teacher, Yokota Kampa Sensei, says, you can't accurately treat someone unless you are the placid lake and also the vessel in which they ride from the shores of disease to the shores of health. So you need to hold them. We have this phrase in English that's very popular right now called hold space. We say we're holding space for someone, but you not only have to hold the space for them, but then you also have to accurately reflect them. And you can't do that unless you're calm as well. You know, so I love that you're going through and really breaking that down. I'm curious though, how did that get over to France? Because that seems pretty far from Brazil.
It is. So I have this very, very dear friend called Silvia Ferreira. She's a power mover here in courses in Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And she's friends with Philippe Sionneau, who is arguably the most famous acupuncturist in France. I mean, he's an Andorra now. He's no longer in France because, you know, the French law is really hard on non-MD acupuncturists, really, really hard. So he moved to Spain, and then now he's in Andorra. And she invited me to his course in São Paulo. So I went, and there we were. And Philippe, she had mentioned my work to Philippe, and Philippe was interested because Philippe, at the time, he had a team of people, wonderful people working with him. And he had a student that accompanied him. So we were having lunch together. And Philip said, "So what's your deal, Daniel? What do you do? How does it work?" I say, "Well, it works does and so." And then I realized that his colleague, he had neck pain. I had seen that before because I saw him having a hard time moving his neck. So I said, "Oh, it's easy. I can demonstrate." You mean here? Yeah, why not? So you got a neck pain, right? And the colleague, I don't remember his name anymore. He said, yeah, really, it's really hard. It's been bothering me for a few times. And Philip said, he's a tough patient to treat. I said, okay, let's see. So I did something for like, I was a bit nervous. So I did 2.5 minutes, maybe that long. And then I asked him to move his neck, and he moved his neck with a slight difficulty, but nothing like it was before. It was 95% better.
Mm.
So that impacted him, I dare say. So and this was on a Thursday, and Sunday when we said goodbye, I asked him, how's your neck finally? And he said, oh, it never lost the effect. The gain remained. So that was good. That impressed him. And then Philip asked me to teach in France under his auspices in 2016. And this first class I had in France, we had over 40 people in the class.
Wow.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. And some of the students were so enthusiastic about that they said, Daniel, let's make an association for your work, so we can continue to show your work around here in Paris. And then eventually that connected to Lyon. We had a group in Lyon. So normally now I teach the Paris, Lyon, and Genève. And how do you say that in English? The capital of Switzerland? No, not the capital. South Switzerland and Genevieve?
Genevieve? Not Genevieve.
Genevieve, yeah.
Anyway, I know what you're talking about.
Right. The place with the lake and, the jet d'eau, that one. So so that's where my circuit in Europe is at present. So I have been invited to Northern Africa, and I've also taught in Spain too.
Wow.
And I have a standing invitation to England, but COVID. So
I'm curious. So when you're teaching abroad, it sounds like you can speak French.
Oh yeah.
So do you speak any other languages besides English, Portuguese, and French?
I speak, properly saying, I speak fluently Spanish too.
Okay.
I understand Italian. I understand a bit of German. I can read a comic book in German.
Wow.
And 日本語は難しくね。And a little Chinese too. Actually, I speak better Chinese than Japanese.
Wow, so you're very much a linguist, very much.
I like languages, yeah.
Yeah. Can I, if you don't mind me asking, can I ask how old you are as well?
How old I am?
Yeah.
How long do you think I am? Oh, the classical question.
At least early 20s, at least.
At least. Well, I'll be in 2 months' time or so. I'll be 55.
I mean, you've just accomplished so much for such a short period of time, really, to be able to expand and to teach in so many countries and to have a following that strong definitely shows that what you're doing actually works. Otherwise, people wouldn't want to learn it, right?
Yeah.
So it's just really beautiful to see someone, that's kind of the point of doing these lectures, here on Shinkyu, is that I really want to showcase all of these beautiful people outside of Japan. There's amazing practitioners in Japan, but then also to showcase resources around the world that could perhaps be local to help practitioners become better where they're at, rather than have them travel, once a weekend. That's my whole thing with Shinkyu as well, as, with Shinkyu University, I've structured it so you have online access, monthly workshop access, and then access to live person workshops for lifetime if you become a member. It's not like I'm going to take a weekend workshop and dip my toe into the pond and decide it's warm enough that I like the pond, but never really go swimming, And so it'd be great. It is great that someone like you is in Brazil, and then we have people like Oren Kivity, who was in Malaysia and, is, now subsequently moved, but there's these teachers across the world, and I really want to highlight those to people. So, I'm curious, I know we've gone through how you were introduced and how it really changed your clinic, and definitely the trajectory of your career, in a very financially, and then also, I'm assuming, emotionally very good way, because emotionally you've helped so many people, right? Both physically and mentally through your work. I'm curious if let's say that I'm a brand new student, I've just practiced TCM and I'm interested in getting into Japanese acupuncture, or maybe I'm someone who's studied a little bit here and there, but really wants to dive deep now. What would be your advice for those students who are wanting to go deeper into Japanese acupuncture and Moxibustion?
Well, this is a difficult question for me to answer, because you see, in Brazil, we have virtually no resources in Japanese acupuncture. So I'd have to think, what could someone from abroad, where could they contact Japanese acupuncture? I know that such a program as you are presenting, Maya, would be a great introduction to Japanese acupuncture, because I've known you for a while, even if you're not in touch all the time, like,
Right.
but I know the depth to which you have entered Japanese acupuncture. This is in your everything. So I think that the main thing is to realize that Japanese acupuncture is not an intellectual exercise.
Mm.
Japanese acupuncture is not about how much you know and how smart you are. It is about your dexterity and your ability to look at the patient, understand this patient. And you can only look at the patient if you are yourself available to the patient, right?
Mm.
If you're not available. So, and I think that a Japanese acupuncture, contrarily, differently from a TCM as it is taught in Chinese universities now, it opens your heart to your patient. The learning itself of Japanese acupuncture, because we know in TCM and Chinese classical thought, of the five senses, it is touch that is connected to the heart.
Mm.
So every time you touch your patient, you're activating your shen, you're activating your heart, and you're necessarily activating the contact between your inner self and what is outside, because that's what the shen does, right? It intermediates your subjective activity and what you can observe in the world outside. It's the Shen that does that. So if the Shen goes, you can connect with the world, right? So touching is a great way to stimulate your Shen, your sensibility. So I think that Japanese acupuncture will open this way to you. So I would definitely recommend for you who are considering learning Japanese acupuncture to look for a school or for a program that that's not just a short duration thing. Like Maya was saying, dip your finger in the pond, but okay, it's good, but I'm not diving just now. That you'll have the time to let Japanese acupuncture sink in. You have to let Japanese acupuncture sink in, and don't have to understand the Japanese acupuncture. If it were just a matter of understanding, you just get some 3-4 books, you read them, and there you have it. If you're intelligent enough, you'll understand it. But that doesn't mean you will be able to do the little thing in Japanese acupuncture. It has to be in your body. And from going to your body, at the same time, you'll go to your spirit and to your heart. Then it will open. And this is what makes people think you're, they say you're a wizard or something like that. Like, you know, because you look at the patient and you say, this has happened to me many, many times. Oh, I see you had these brothers, they used to beat you up, right? And then the patient look at me, how do you know that? But you know, you just know, you know, from his body stance, like he was afraid to be pummeled. And like when you touch the belly, the person jumps and say, okay, this person, he suffered aggressions, physical aggressions in his belly.
Yeah.
I can tell that. And then the patient suffers a change. And this change is something that is beyond the scope of normal acupuncture.
So, I mean, several things in there that I just absolutely love. The first is that being called a wizard, I laughed because I taught a course in Israel and I was teaching palpation because as you said, palpation is, and as Jeffrey Dan says as well, if there's one common underlying factor of all Japanese acupuncture styles is that they're all heavily based on palpation because of this influence of blind acupuncturists. And so I was teaching palpation to this group in Israel. And I said, okay, well, we're going to find the live point, or the active point is what Stephen Brown for Shudodeme calls it. And I said, we're going to find the live point, because they literally call it the ikitasubo, the point that is alive, right? The point that's living. And we're finding a point. And he said, okay, how about here? And I said, okay, well, it's a little bit off. We're going to just go a little bit over here and in this direction. And the patient, the other participant on the table said, oh yeah, that feels so much more connected. I can feel that now. I have that echo of energy, that hibiki at this point. And I'll never forget, the guy looked at me and he said, are you a witch? And I was like, I will, as long as you said that as a compliment, then yes, I am. But you're absolutely correct in that I was teaching a student, what was that, 2-3 days ago, beginning hara palpation. I teach in the acupuncture school here. And the student, I said, look, you can't accurately palpate when you're leaning and not standing and supporting your own weight. And because you're leaning, you have pain here in your neck because it's connected here and connected here and connected here. You can just visually see it. You see the pattern. As you said, you can see how they're holding the holding patterns, the memories that have been implanted into the muscle. And he went, oh yeah, you're right. But it's so important to develop a palpation practice and to really have a teacher like yourself or me or someone else to be with you there for years to come yes. back and say, no, not here, no, not like this. It's so important, I believe, to have a teacher that you dedicate yourself to, and that, as you said, to just let it seep in.
Absolutely.
It's such amazing good advice.
Let me cut you here a bit. You know Miyawaki Sensei's habit of pulling the patient's feet?
Yeah.
Have you seen him do that?
Mm-hmm.
So he came to Rio and he did that. And I saw him doing that and said, wow, I'm going to try it. And I spent 1 year doing this to every single one of my patients.
Wow.
But that didn't help. So I gave up. And sometime later, I think 2 years later, we did the Japanese acupuncture program in Paris. That was the best. It was a 2 days workshops program.
Okay.
3 of them were given by me and Acacio together. So we had everything you can imagine, technique, exercises, OQ exercise with paper, with a thing, Chinatsu and Kyutoshin, everything together, all the techniques typical of Japanese acupuncture, and then the masters and their thing. So we had the Kuwahara sensei to open up, then Miyawaki sensei, and then Junko Shuto sensei. Right? This was really brilliant. It was horrible from an economic standpoint because it was super expensive to bring people from these states, from Japan and from Brazil at the same time. It was impossible to work financially, but it doesn't matter. It's an ideological thing. We wanted to do that, and we did. So then I met Miyawaki sensei again, and then I saw him pull the patient's feet, and then I understood. When I saw him do it, then I knew I could do it afterwards. And indeed, that was the case.
Mm.
Just by seeing him do once, everything clicked in place. I said, wow, so that was it. So a master is something that always goes, by definition, must go beyond your expectations.
Mm.
If you can expect what your master is going to do, you haven't found your master yet. The master is always a surprise. He goes beyond. And so after I understood this thing because it's more of a multi-purpose thing, right? So he uses that for his Kodo Fukushima lineage of extraordinary meridian treatment, right? So there's a specific Fukushin for extraordinary meridians that's derived from Kodo Fukushima sensei and developed by Miyawaki sensei. And then he pulls on the feet so as to ascertain whether he had really found the good thing to do. Okay, so basically what you do is you pull on the big two and you watch whether your knuckles, your thumb's knuckles, if they are aligned. And normally it's not aligned. When you pull, the patient is off. And then you do the treatment, then you pull again, the patient is perfectly aligned if you did the right treatment. So this is wonderfully practical, right? Just great. And so I found out that I could use that with a Qigong too. So I began to test that, and then I used Kobayashi Sensei's idea that you have to strengthen PC. This is Dalian is a PC.
I'm
7.
so bad with the numbers. I'm sorry, I'm not
me
of
too.
help.
No. Yeah, PC 7 and a lung 9, so as to reinforce Jing, right? So he has the here thing. So you have to warm the body and stop the cooling, which leads to death eventually. So I would verify the patient's feet, throw the chi at those 2 points, then go back to the patient's feet and blink, there they were, just perfectly aligned. And this, this is the thing about Japanese acupuncture. It gives you the tools to be creative. You can do any number of things with Japanese acupuncture, any number of things. If I told you the things I do with Japanese acupuncture, you wouldn't believe it.
I mean, but it's so true. I mean, I say this like, I feel like a repeating record sometimes because I'm always telling people, look, you have to become a technician before you can become a clinician. And what you're talking about, being creative with the medicine, that's being a clinician. That's taking all of these little techniques that you have, and putting them together to make an art, to make music, to make jazz. And
Totally.
you can't do that without this strong foundational piece of not only building yourself as a core and really refining yourself, but then going on and refining the technical aspect, watching your master's work. And one of the other things you were talking about was, when you were watching Miyawaki sensei and watching what he does, and then you went back and watched him again. That's actually one of the things I teach in my in the first class of Shinkyu University, is how to properly learn from a Japanese practitioner. Because the Japanese practitioner, I don't know about in Brazil, but I know here in the States, when we're in school, we're taught as soon as we don't understand something, I don't understand. We don't wait until the end of the lecture. We raise our hand right away. I don't understand. But in Japan, you are required to wait until the end of the class before you ask a question. That is just what you do, because they want you to watch and think through the question as they continue the explanation and steal with your eyes. And then finally, if your answer isn't answered, then your question isn't answered, then you ask the question at the end. And I find most people, especially on the Untitled Japan tour, who are just new to Japanese acupuncture, the first thing they want to do is whip out their phone and start filming. And I'm always like, put your phone away. You need to start really looking at what you're seeing, because you're not seeing what they're doing. You're just kind of like lazing through it and trying to get to the end. You know, you need to watch, really, really watch, and then you need to go home and practice it and then come back and watch again. And unfortunately, that mentorship piece, unless you have the capability of creating a workshop like you did, it's very hard to find. You know, going back to, as you were saying in Rio, there's not a lot of Japanese acupuncture, you know, besides yourself. It's really important to find a mentor.
Don't look now, but I'm no longer in Rio.
Oh, I didn't. Where are you now?
I'm in northeastern Brazil.
Oh.
It's much sunnier, much calmer. I have the most wonderful beaches. And well, life is much more tranquil here.
Whenever you would like me to come down and visit, just let me know. Just let me know. Okay.
My doors are open. So, you know, Elizabeth Shue, who is a scholar on, I don't know if you heard of her. She's on Asian medicines and stuff. So she proposed that there are 3 times of transmission of contents in Chinese medicine. So you have the teacher-student relationship, which is standard what you see in most schools and universities. That is, you have a teacher that exposes basically the theoretical aspects of Chinese medicine, and maybe you have a secondary or a posterior period where you will learn the practical skills with some other teacher that does not really talks much about the theoretical aspects, but more practical aspects. But then it's the teacher-student relationship. What is expected is that you study and acquire skills, but there's this style of relationship. It's more academic, right? Where your intellectual abilities are highly valued. Then you have the pupil-mentor relationship, which is like sometimes you have this in China too. You have those special students that go to the teachers, to the shifu's house to drink tea, and then he expounds on his personal take on the official medicine, right? See, and this is the more like the way I see for learning Japanese acupuncture. You don't look for a teacher. You have to have a mentor. That is someone that you can observe treating and that will not consider his job done if he talks about the theory, just the theory.
Such right? Well said.
And finally, you have the master-disciple relationship, which is very different. So the master and disciple is a very specific relationship, very much Chinese, where you know the Chinese term for a master in the sense like martial arts master is a shifu. Shi is a teacher and fu is father. So in the classical Chinese society, a father has almost absolute powers over his offspring's fate. So a shifu can order you, for instance, to go live in another city to spread your style there, and you just have to go.
Yep.
You know,
they have that in Japan too. It's called a shisho.
Shisho, okay.
Shisho, yeah. So Yasuda Sensei is we created a finalized relationship because I had asked him, God, so many times I can't count, so many times to be my shisho. I asked him and he always said no. And I was smart enough to keep asking because that's part of it. You have to keep asking.
Yeah.
And now he is definitely my, he is who I will go to continue to learn from. Yeah.
And normally in ancient China, this kind of relationship didn't involve payment, but it involved devotion. So, for instance, the teacher expected the disciple to fill his pipe, serve tea, help him with house chores, everything. So it's more of a father-son-daughter relationship than properly very far away from the academic model we are used to. So I think that in between the two, you have the mentor-pupil relationship, and it's there that the magic happens. The magic doesn't happen in the classroom. It's not that the classroom is useless. Of course not. The classroom is great. You will learn many interesting things in a classroom if you have good teachers. But they will, let's say, this is more, it's like you have to have the science, but you also have to have the technique.
Mm.
So the technique part of it is only transmitted within the context of this mentor-disciple relationship. It's there that you can really get the goods, the goods that will make you a remarkable acupuncturist.
I completely 100% hands down completely agree. Like, I think the master disciple relationship is something that comes after a mentor pupil, when you really find someone that you really want to refine yourself with. But it's that requiring that amount of dedication from your teacher requires, I mean, my Yasuda sensei says it's like being in a marriage. Like, you don't want to ever be in a marriage that you want to disintegrate. Possibly. Exactly. I mean, some people might, maybe, but ideally, right? And it's the same with a master and a disciple. You never enter into that relationship saying that I'm going to divorce you someday. Like Yasuda sensei has told me, he's like, once I become your shisho, I am responsible for you until I die. Yes. I am responsible for every single thing that you do. And which is why every single thing that I do is always to honor him and make sure that I am doing my best, even though that we are now a long distance relationship, in order to continue that relationship and to honor the teachings of his teacher, his master, which is Yokota sensei. It's just such a beautifully stated and important thing that you have just stated, that you need to find a mentor and you need to adopt the mindset of a pupil to really become good at Japanese medicine. And yeah, so many jewels in this conversation. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this and to spread what you have learned and what you have gone through to the world, so that way more people can benefit from it. I think the last thing that I'd love to hear from you is, if people would like to learn with you, where and how would they get a hold of you? And I'll make sure to put all of that information, by the way, in the description box below. But if you could tell people, like, I'm assuming in France you have your organization, but what if they were in South America or in the States and they would like to come learn from you?
Oh yeah, well, they can get in touch with me, believe me or not, through my Facebook page. This is ancient story, right? Facebook, but I'm still there. So if you send me a message through Messenger, I will answer.
Thank you again so much, Daniel. I really do appreciate it.
It's been such a pleasure and a privilege to talk with you, Maya. Thank you so much for inviting me, really.
Yeah. All right. So thank you very much for watching all the way to the end of this video. Don't forget, if you like this content, excuse me, if you like this content, to like, subscribe, hit the little bell to be notified when we are coming out with new videos, usually every week. And if you are interested in getting more mentorship and one-on-one teachings in Japanese acupuncture, you can also reach out to me at Shinkyu University. So at shinkyuuni.com, that'll also be in the description box below. So thank you so much. And until next time, happy practicing.
Happy practicing. Bye-bye.